I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are having this symposium. Okay, so inherent requirements, yes or no? If yes, what are some of the principles we need to consider? And if no, what are the alternatives? I actually changed my presentation yesterday spontaneously because I sort of had some, having some thinking, and I think this is the nature, which I think goes to what Matt was saying of the dynamic nature of this work, is that there's always this sort of process of rethinking and thinking and re-evolution, as Amanda referred to, and so the thinking is changing all the time. So I guess that's just a little example of how that happens. Okay, so if we are going to, I suppose what I wanted to talk about really is just some principles. If we are going to proceed with articulating inherent requirements, I think that there are some areas that we really just need to really lock down. So the first one, and I think all of these things have actually been alluded to in the conversations earlier, which I think is really interesting because really we're all thinking the same thing. The first one is training and education for academic and teaching staff. So under that one, I think we really need to ensure that there's clarity around the meaning and use of inherent requirements, not as a tool of exclusion, but as a means of commencing discussion around reasonable adjustments. So providing information, so on a practical level, so it's about providing information to staff and to students, and that can be in a direct face-to-face kind of manner, as Trevor was alluding to, or through web resources or through training packages. RMIT is currently engaged, my colleague Pearl is currently engaged in developing a training package for academic staff around how to talk about inherent requirements, understanding inherent requirements, and how to discuss inherent requirements with students. The other thing that I think is really important in this piece is to guide and model conversations with students which are informative and supportive. So one of the ways in which we've done this here at RMIT is we've developed a sort of a template with a script for talking with students around issues that they might be coming up against in terms of the challenges in putting reasonable adjustments in place. The second area is around robust processes. So ensuring that inherent requirements are presented as information rather than as an obstacle, and then ensuring that if there is a situation and circumstance, which I think Sandra was referring to, where a student appears not to meet the inherent requirements, that we have a process that is clearly articulated to everybody concerned, the staff and the students, and it's a consistent process, and it ensures that all reasonable adjustments are actually investigated in a very thorough manner. And also, I guess that the processes somehow relate to existing university policies and processes. So they really should align with existing university and policy and process. One of the ways we've done this here at RMIT is that we've actually developed a whole bunch of flowcharts. So it's a flowchart for students and a flowchart for teaching staff as well. So a visual kind of prompt to, if this happens, this is what you need to do. If this happens, this is what you need to do. I'm really happy to share the flowcharts and scripts and the material that we've kind of put together around this after the symposium. The third area is around support for students. So I guess this is really calling out that students should be well supported throughout any discussions and lots of alternative options posited. there may be an opportunity for collaboration with, between disability practitioners and academic staff. Again, there may be some collaboration opportunities there with careers counselling staff, but really making sure that students feel very supported in the process of talking around their possible challenges around meeting inherent requirements in a program. Students should have lots of information about grievance processes, so that if things don't go their way, or perhaps they're not happy with the way things are going, then they need to understand those processes. One of the things that is currently sort of, I guess, being discussed here at RMIT is alternative exit points for students who may have entered a program, may have had an acquired condition after they entered a program, may then not be able to meet the inherent requirements, and may, really wanting to acknowledge the work and that they've already put into that program. So that's another kind of possibility. And I guess the other thing that Matt really alluded to around this sort of dynamic nature of this work is that there needs to be a process for regular review of inherent requirement statements. Things change. We need to account for changes in views, changes to technology, and industry changes. Okay. If we don't go down the road of inherent requirements, developing inherent requirements, what can we do? So some alternatives include things like just providing clear information for prospective students. I think this is something I've mentioned before. There seems to be a tension between the amount of information we provide to students and the marketing. The marketing guys really want to provide less because they want to get people in, and we want to provide more because we want to give people really good opportunities to understand what they're getting themselves into. We've called this out already. Sector-wide engagement with registration bodies. I think as a sector, here we have 86 people who are interested in inherent requirements. We have, who are interested in these issues, and they're representing people, they're representing, institutions across the nation. We actually have some power here to talk to registration bodies and to influence registration bodies, and I think we need to garner that power. And education, again, in the academic and teaching areas, encouraging a culture of inclusion by focusing on what is possible rather than what isn't, leading discussion around the benefits of a diverse student cohort and a workforce in all professions. So in conclusion, I'm spilling water everywhere. Inclusion is the aspiration, regardless of whether we go forward with inherent requirements or we don't, and education is really key to either direction. Thanks.